My phone finally went quiet. Not because anyone had given up, but because the battery died somewhere around the 59th missed call. I sat at my kitchen table in the morning light, staring at a black screen, and realized the silence in my house didn't feel lonely at all. It felt like clarity. My name is Andrea. I'm 65, a widow for 10 years, and the sole owner of 80 acres of vineyard that took me half my life to build. 2 hours before that silence, I'd been on the phone with my daughter Samantha, asking a simple question about the florist's delivery time for her wedding. A wedding happening on my land, in 6 days. She didn't answer the question. She gave me a pause instead, the kind that tells you something's coming before a single word does. Then she said it. "Mom, I don't think you should be at the wedding." I didn't drop my mug. I didn't raise my voice. I asked calmly why I wasn't welcome at my own daughter's wedding on my own property. She stammered something about Greg's family being traditional, about not fitting in, about not making anyone uncomfortable. I looked out at the rows of vines I'd spent decades of my life on, took a slow sip of coffee, and said one word. Understood. Then I hung up. I didn't wait for an apology. That window had already closed. I just hadn't realized until that morning how long ago it had shut. A week earlier, we'd all sat right here on this patio, string lights glowing above the table, and I had slid a velvet box across to Samantha and Greg. Inside it was a brass key to the stone house, a property I'd spent 2 years restoring, worth $8 million, and I was handing it to them as a wedding gift so they could start their marriage without a mortgage hanging over their heads. Samantha gasped. Greg picked up the key, turned it over like he was appraising a used car, and smirked at my dirt-stained fingernails. "Guess we'll need a landscaper," he said. "Can't have the place looking like a working farm." Samantha laughed and leaned into his shoulder. She didn't defend the land that paid for her college. She didn't defend the woman who worked it. I said nothing that night. I filed it away, the way you file away a hairline crack in a foundation, telling yourself it's probably nothing. I was wrong. By the time I sat alone in my kitchen a week later, I understood exactly what that crack had been trying to tell me. Generosity without boundaries isn't generosity at all. It's an invitation. I didn't cry. Tears need a sense of loss, and what I felt instead was sharper than grief. A sudden, total clarity. The kind that arrives right before you make a decision you'll never regret. I stood, walked to my study, and opened my laptop. The wedding balance, catering, string quartet, floral installations, was set to transfer automatically at noon. I clicked cancel. 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 I watched the numbers return to my account like water finding its level again. Then I called Ben, my property manager of 15 years, and asked him for one favor. Change the gate code, swap the front lock on the stone house for something heavier, and turn away any vendors who showed up that week. Ben didn't ask why. He just said, "Consider it done." He knew my tone well enough not to need a reason. I hadn't filed a single legal document. I hadn't screamed at anyone. I had simply reached out and quietly taken back what had always, technically, still been mine. The velvet box held a key. It never held a deed. That deed was locked in my fireproof safe, exactly where it had always been. I went outside to clip roses, letting the sun do what sun does, and by the time I came back an hour later, my phone, charging on the counter, was lit up like a warning beacon. 59 missed calls, a flood of texts, all in the same rising key of panic. "Mom, the caterer says the payment bounced. Andrea, my card was declined for the tent rental. Fix this immediately. Mom, Greg is furious. Call me back right now." I read every message. Not one asked how I was doing. Not one apologized for that morning's phone call. Every single text wanted the same thing. My money, restored, quietly, so the wedding could go on exactly as planned, with me exactly where they'd decided I belonged, absent, invisible, and paying. I set the phone face down on the counter and went back out to the porch, because I already knew what was coming next. Digital silence, I understood, was about to force a very long drive. It took them an hour and 45 minutes. I heard Greg's SUV before I saw it, the low hum of money trying to sound unbothered. I sat in my rocking chair with a fresh glass of iced tea and watched through the trees as the vehicle stopped at my gate. Greg leaned out, punching in the old code over and over. Nothing happened. Ben had been thorough. After several minutes of furious button pressing, they realized there was only one way up, a half-mile of steep gravel on foot, in Greg's designer loafers and Samantha's delicate sandals. I watched them climb. Watched the gravel humiliate every step they took. By the time they reached my porch, they were sweating through expensive fabric, breathless, furious. "What is wrong with your gate?" Greg demanded, skipping any greeting entirely. Samantha gripped the railing. "Mom, why aren't you answering? The vendors are threatening to cancel. There's been a mistake. Call the bank." I took a slow sip of my tea. "There is no mistake, Samantha." Greg stepped forward, red-faced. "You promised to pay for this wedding. You gave us the stone house. You can't just throw a tantrum and lock us out." I looked calmly at the brass key still clutched in his sweaty hand. "I didn't throw a tantrum, Greg. I received a phone call this morning telling me I'm an embarrassment, unwelcome at my own daughter's wedding, on my own land. I simply respected your wishes. I removed myself." "You removed the money?" he shouted. "My money belongs to me. My property belongs to me." I turned back to Samantha, who was studying the floorboards like they might offer her an escape route. "Did you think you could exile me from my own family in my own home, and I'd keep funding the life you built without me?" She shifted, uncomfortable. "Mom, Greg just meant his parents are traditional. We didn't want any awkwardness. You're overreacting. Just open the gate so the trucks can get to our house." "Your house?" I let a small, humorless smile settle on my face. "You don't own that house, Samantha. You're holding a spare key to a building I own. A key to locks that were changed this morning." Greg's mouth fell open. He looked down at the key like it had betrayed him personally. "You changed the locks? You can't do that. We have things in there." "A few boxes of decorations," I corrected, currently sitting outside the front gate. Samantha finally looked up, panic in her eyes. "Mom, stop. You're ruining my wedding. You're ruining my life over a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding," I said, my voice even. "You told me exactly how you see me. A bank account, a piece of real estate, nothing more. You chose a man who disrespects me, and you let him decide I didn't belong at your wedding. That was your right. Closing my checkbook is mine?" Greg stepped closer, trying to use his height the way some men use height instead of arguments. "You are going to unlock that gate and wire that money, or you will never see your daughter again." I stood, slow and steady, and looked him dead in the eye. "Get off my porch." He'd expected a negotiation. I gave him silence instead, and silence, when it's certain enough, is louder than any threat he could make. "Mom, please," Samantha started, voice breaking. "The wedding here is canceled," I said. "Take your boxes at the gate and leave." I turned, walked inside, and locked the deadbolt behind me. Through the door, I heard Greg shouting, Samantha crying, and then, slowly, painfully, the crunch of gravel retreating the way it had arrived. I made myself a sandwich and didn't look out the window once. Saturday came with a cool breeze and a stillness that should have belonged to hundreds of guests, and never did. I woke early, walked the vines with Ben, and drank coffee while the fog lifted off the hills. "Couple confused catering vans on the main road," he mentioned, casual as weather. "Told them there was no event today. They turned around." He mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that Greg had left him 3 voicemails and offered him $100 to open the service gate. "Didn't even call him back," Ben said, sipping his coffee. "I baked bread that day. I didn't check my phone once. For the first time in longer than I could remember, my home felt entirely, completely mine again. 3 weeks of silence passed. Then, on a Tuesday, a familiar car pulled up to the gate. I buzzed her in. Samantha climbed out alone, thinner somehow, in a plain sweater instead of the wardrobe I'd watched her curate for a man who never once defended her. No ring on her finger. She sat on the porch steps and told me, in a voice barely above a whisper, that she and Greg never got married. That when the money disappeared, so did he. Not physically, not right away, but in every way that mattered. That he'd screamed at her the entire drive back to the city, blaming her for being useless enough to lose control of her own mother. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she said, tears falling freely now. "I let him treat you terribly because I was scared of losing him. I was so stupid." I handed her a tissue. I didn't reach for a hug, not yet. Forgiveness matters, but so do boundaries, and I'd spent too many years confusing the two. "You weren't stupid," I told her. "You were weak. You let someone disrespect your mother in your mother's home because you valued what he represented more than who I actually was." She nodded, wiping her eyes, and said the only thing that mattered. "I know. I have to earn that back." I told her she was welcome to visit, but she needed to build her own life first. No check, no stone house, just a slow, honest rebuilding, one phone call a week, no performance required from either of us. Greed, though, rarely leaves quietly. Weeks later, Greg showed up unannounced, holding grocery store flowers and wearing the same smug expression, having clearly timed his visit around my open harvest gate. He suggested, with a straight face, that we put this silly feud behind us, that Samantha was struggling, that if I reconsidered the stone house, he'd take her back. I didn't set down my pen. "The stone house is no longer vacant, Greg," I said. His smile vanished. "I leased it to an agricultural cooperative. Young farmers live and train there now. The income funds community grants." His face went red. "You gave an $8 million estate to farmers?" "I gave it to people who actually respect the dirt that feeds them," I said, standing, nodding once toward Ben, who'd stepped out from the barn shadows wiping his hands on a rag. A quiet, unmistakable wall of authority. "You're trespassing now. I'd get back in your car before Ben decides to test his tractor tires against your bumper." Greg looked at Ben, looked at me, understood he had nothing left to leverage, and drove off in a cloud of dust that settled back into the earth like it had never come at all. That autumn, I hosted a harvest dinner on the Stonehouse deck for families in our community who'd fallen on hard times. Long wooden tables, food from our own gardens, wine from our own grapes, laughter I hadn't heard in that house in years. Standing there that evening, I understood something I wished I'd learned decades earlier. I never had to shrink myself to fit anyone else's idea of who I should be. I built this life with my own two hands, and anyone who wants a place in it simply has to walk through the gate with respect. If they can't, I'm perfectly at peace locking it behind them. If this story reminded you how important it is to protect your peace, tell me in the comments how you would have handled Greg's last visit, and subscribe because there's more where this came from.